Hi, welcome to Pumpkin Spice Podcast. Hey, Graham.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty well. This is Rob. That's Graham. You might not be able to notice, but you might notice I've got a little bit of a head cold, so apologies there. And Graham, I just want to give a little bit of a warning. Sad note. We kind of talked about this before. I've had some issues with my family, so we're going to try and keep the episodes running on time, but we might be delayed a little bit. Just a heads up for anyone who's listening.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to say that Rob might try to fool you with that head cold. He was actually just really emotionally involved with our movie today, A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6, Freddy's Dead.
Get out of here now, please. Now.
Hey, you forgot the power glove.
New Line Cinema has said, you know what? I think it's time to just kill off Freddy.
Yeah, after 5, I think every executive at New Line is like, yep, we're out of ideas. We
think we can do this.
We can't carry this on very much longer, so let's go and try to bring some excitement to the series and give Freddy a final send-off.
So we start off, and you've got the John Doe character, right? And he's having some weird dream sequence.
Yeah, he's in an airplane, and it turns out he's dreaming, and Freddy is haunting the airplane, and there's like this sort of a riff on what goes on in Wizard of Oz.
Oh, yeah, because he falls out of the airplane, but then he wakes up in his bed, but then he's still in a dream, and then Freddy's on a broom. And what does Freddy say there?
I'll get you and your little soul, too. So when the audience sees Freddy Krueger outside the window on a broom, a la Wizard of Oz, that should really set the tone for what we're about to see for the rest of the film. Kind of some goofy, kind of Looney Tunes humor almost.
Prior to the story opening, you've got your quotes like most of the other movies have, and then you've got this weird John Carpenter-esque text scrolling about how there's no teenagers in Springwood anymore. And now one is left. And Freddy sends John Doe to Springwood. This kid is the final Elm Street kid.
Right. And
John Doe, and he's gotten away, and that's why Freddy takes him back to Springwood.
Absolutely. And when he arrives in Springwood, he goes to a juvenile home.
Well, he wanders around, not sleeping, and he gets taken in at a juvenile home. He has amnesia, and they try and help him. The doc, who's Billy Zane's sister, correct?
Yeah, she's Billy Zane's sister in real life, Lisa Zane.
Maggie. Her name's Maggie in the film.
Yeah, I can't remember what else she's been in. I think that's the only movie I've ever seen her in.
Lisa Zane decides she wants to help John Doe.
To discover his identity, right?
Well, discover his identity to jumpstart his amnesia. She takes him back to Springwood.
Gotcha.
At the same time that some of these other kids at the juvenile delinquent home have decided they're going to sneak out by hiding in the back of that van.
Yes, which ultimately leads to them meeting Freddy.
We'll get into those individual characters a little bit later, but suffice it to say, we find out that there's no children in this town, so any adult that encounters these kids either yell at them or act like they're not there.
When Maggie's trying to help John Doe discover his identity, they meet a doctor played by Yaphet Kotto, who you probably might have seen in Alien or the Schwarzenegger vehicle, The Running Man. And at this point, they sort of discover John Doe's identity and that he may be, in fact, the son of Freddy Krueger, who he conceived before he became Freddy Krueger.
He also then discovers that if you hold on to Freddy and wake up, you can bring Freddy into the real world. We also discover a lot of discoveries in this movie, maybe because they're trying to end it, that Freddy gets his powers through dream demons that asked him, upon being burnt to death, what he wanted. And his answer, Graham?
He wants it all.
It's so ridiculous. I can't remember if this happens after that scene or before, but when John Doe is in his dream sequence where he dies, he has this back and forth with Freddy where he goes, "You won't kill me, I'm your son." And he's like, and Freddy says something along the lines of like, "Wrong again." and then kills him, drops him on the bed of spikes. As he's dying, he wakes up. He's being held in Maggie's arms, and he says, "It wasn't a son. Fred Krueger had a daughter. There's 2 more women leads in this movie. What do we do? Who is it?"
Yeah, there's 2 possible choices, yeah.
The whole time, we're thinking it's John Doe.
Freddy's daughter is, in fact, Lisa Zane.
It's not long after. I think that's once it goes into the dream state where Maggie, or Lisa Zane's character, has to wear the glasses. In person, she becomes part of this flashback series where we see, finally, Robert Englund. Well, there's a few times through this series where you see Robert Englund not in Freddy makeup, but this time as Fred Krueger.
Yeah, and those scenes, in my opinion, are the best in the film.
They're amazing. They're shot well. They actually convey some sort of story that's not over the top, but also are just...
Well, and let's just go ahead and say, I think one of the most unnerving sequences in the entire series is in that flashback scene that Rob is describing. Through Lisa Zane's perspective as a little girl, we watch as she looks on as Freddy Krueger, her father, strangles her mother after her mother found the tools that Freddy uses in the basement. And so he's strangling her, and she's pleading with him, "I'll never tell. I'll never tell." And it is legitimately pretty haunting and pretty creepy, and I think those scenes are just so well executed.
It sticks with you.
When it comes for the flashback scenes in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6, Freddy's Dead, I mean, those for me are the highlights.
Maggie ends up pulling Fred Krueger out of the dream world. Use a bunch of weapons on him. Brass knuckles, baseball bat with nails, throwing stars, throwing knives. There's like this weirdly too long of a sequence of her throwing knives and stars at Freddy to pin him against the wall. And then Maggie puts on Freddy's glove because it's been knocked off, and Freddy is stabbed with his own glove, which that metaphor would be great if that actually killed Freddy. They then go one more step where the other woman who's in the scene throws her a pipe bomb. She puts that into Freddy's chest, and he blows up, and she's like, "Oh, Freddy's dead." Roll credits.
Yeah, it's so lame, and the irony of Freddy's Dead is that the deaths in 1, 3, and even 4 are better final deaths than the bullshit dynamite throwing star scene that we get. It was like the scene was written for Steven Seagal. I don't know what the hell they were thinking, but you can't miss the irony that Freddy's Dead has one of the worst endings for Freddy.
But I think that's mainly because that whole last 20 minutes is completely in 3D. And Hollywood is still making 3D movies.
I personally have never seen a 3D film that's blown my mind. I've seen some 3D films that I've appreciated because of the gimmick factor. For example, My Bloody Valentine from the 1980s was done in 3D, and that's a fun movie. Friday the 13th Part 3D is a fun movie, but they're not game changers. I mean, I can't think of any of my favorite films and say to myself, man, that would be better or somehow improved if it was done in 3D.
Our audience probably doesn't want to hear us just complain about 3D movies all the time.
If you do, go to our second podcast, Complaining About 3D Movies with Rob and Graham.
Let's talk about Peter Jackson.
Oh, okay, yeah. Peter Jackson was the original... Well, he wrote the original script for A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6, and it wasn't called Freddy's Dead. It was called something else. And I actually think this is the best working title for a Freddy film, The Dream Lover.
Oh, it sounds sexy.
I would go see that movie. I would go buy a ticket for that film.
It wouldn't even have to be a Nightmare on Elm Street film. Just title it The Dream Lover, and I'm there.
So yeah, Peter Jackson did the original script, and he was actually supposed to direct. And that sort of fell through whenever Rachel Talalay took over, and we'll get to her in a second. But I wanted to quickly mention that Peter Jackson and New Line Cinema had such a great working relationship on Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6 that it sort of set the foundation for the Lord of the Rings films that would come years later.
Definitely. Bob Shea was just like, oh, we should probably give this guy who has an eye for detail a job again.
Yeah, we're going to keep that guy's number.
Let's talk about Rachel Talalay. She asked to be the director of this film, and she told Bob when he said okay that she did not want to call it A Nightmare on Elm Street. She wanted to call it Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare.
Yeah, that's right, Robin. I just wanted to say real quickly that Rachel Talalay is the first woman to write and direct a Nightmare on Elm Street movie.
Yeah, which is incredible because we got so many weird directors like Jack Shoulder, and then we get this awesome person who worked as a producer on Pink Flamingos all the way at the end.
Yeah, Rachel is a person in the film industry that worked herself from the bottom all the way to the top. She was a PA on some early New Line Cinema films. She was helped with distribution on some early John Waters pictures, and she just kept on working up the ranks to finally becoming a producer on the Nightmare on Elm Street films, and then she asked Bob if she could direct number 6, and again, I think she did. There are some really brilliant moments in that film. Some of the best scares in the series come from this film. The thing about this film is that I think the cast really works. For some reason, they just got a group of actors that really worked well with each other. The face that you may recognize is Breckin Meyer.
Breckin Meyer was the stoner skater kid in Clueless, and he was the stoner skater kid in Freddy's Dead.
Oh no, he's being typecast.
And then one of my favorites, Leslie Dean.
Yeah, she's great. And let's point out that both Lisa and Leslie survive till the end of the film.
Yeah, which is amazing.
Yeah.
It's always great when people actually survive horror films, especially when they're full-fledged characters.
Yeah, characters that you actually like. I've heard complaints that this movie has too many survivors, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, 3. Too bad.
Yeah.
I do want to go into Leslie Dean a little bit. I think it's important to say that she actually stopped acting and started doing some dance pop and glitter punk bands. There's Femme to Femme, which has been known to be a controversial band. I don't exactly know why. I've never really followed up with Femme to Femme. I'm guessing they had lyrics that people didn't like in the 90s. And then I think her current band is called Scary Cherry and the Bang Bangs. But it really reminds me of when Marilyn Manson came out with Mechanical Animals.
It's a glam goth kind of look.
And I think that's cool. She's been quoted as to say, though, that Freddy's Dead actually brought back some memories for her of some troubling times in her own youth, which she then felt like she needed to take a break from acting and face before moving on. And I think that's kind of why she took a turn more towards music than going back into the film, because I can only imagine going through something tough like that and having to then go, okay, I'm going to go back into the movies. Maybe it'll bring up another horrible memory.
Yeah, that's not something you want to come to grips with on set.
Definitely.
But I wanted to really quickly mention one of my favorite actors out there is Ricky Dean Logan. And if there are any noteworthy directors that happen to listen to this show, please cast Ricky Dean in more movies. He's amazing. He plays the character Carlos, who has the hearing aid. In this film. It's actually a really cool death. But I just thought he was the coolest actor around. And I honestly, Rob, when I was a kid, I used to try to dress like him. I had that jean jacket with the hoodie.
You know who he reminds me of?
Who's that?
Richard Grieco in 21 Jump Street.
But cooler.
Very much cooler.
Yeah,
he's not an undercover cop, for one.
Yeah, and he's not so into himself, and he's not all about trying to be a jerk. And then, of course, Yaphet Kotto, who we already talked about.
Okay, so Graham, I think there's a supporting cast we need to talk about. 3 people in this film that I was surprised to see. It would have been more influential, I guess, at the time, but it was still pretty shocking to go back and watch these and go, oh yeah, this scene has Roseanne and Tom Arnold. Yeah, and that's the scene where, when they're stuck in Springwood, they go to this county fair or town fair, some small little carnival of sorts. And all of the adults see these teenagers and start shouting at them or ignoring their existence. And then at some point, Roseanne pops out of the corner and starts mauling all these kids, pinching their cheeks and telling them that she wants to just take them home. And Tom Arnold, mullet and all, comes around and grabs Roseanne and says, "What are you doing? It'll bring him back. We can't have any kids around here." And then that scene's quickly over after that, and you're left with this eerie suspicion that they know about Freddy. Stuff that you as an audience already know, but it was just kind of funny to see Roseanne and Tom in that scene.
It's a charming scene. I mean, what can we say? Also in the cast is Alice Cooper, who plays Freddy Krueger's father. And in this scene, he comes down the stairs into his basement and finds a young Freddy Krueger there cutting himself. And Alice Cooper says, "All right, Freddy, it's time to take your medicine." And he's about to hit him with a belt. And Freddy says that he's been able to control his pain that he can endure.
So none of the belt lashings. Yeah, none of the belt lashings even hurt him, and he starts chuckling at Alice Cooper. It's a little over the top, if you ask me.
Yeah, sure. And of course, Alice Cooper was hot off his cameo from John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness that I think came out a couple of years before this.
And soon to be on Wayne's World.
Yes, of course. Milwaukee.
Which is Algonquin for the good land. Let's talk about some of the best kills in this one.
Okay, really quickly, my favorite is Carlos, again played by Ricky Dean Morgan, and he has a hearing aid that Freddy replaces with his own brand of a hearing aid, which connects to his brain, and then Freddy whips out a chalkboard and starts clawing at the chalkboard, and Carlos's head explodes.
I like the Breckenmeyer death because he's laying on the couch, getting stoned, watching TV. He gets sucked into the TV through some weird psychedelics, and then is controlled by Freddy through a video game until he is beaten to death by a video game character of his own dad. Freddy Krueger actually uses the line, "Now I'm playing with power," which was a copywritten line from Nintendo, and then later you forgot about the Power Glove, which was a video game glove like the Nintendo Power Glove, except connected to Freddy's glove. And Nintendo threatened to sue them, and Bob Shea said, "Let them sue." But did Nintendo ever sue, Graham?
They never did, but I will say that they sold a lot of Power Gloves because of that darn Freddy movie.
I bet they did. And I don't know if you ever actually used a Power Glove back in the day. I wasn't blown away.
Rob, you're being kind. The fucking thing didn't work. It was for those that don't know what a Power Glove is, it's like an early version of the Wii, Nintendo Wii, and it looked really cool. It was like this glove that had all these buttons on it, and you looked like a cool kid if you had that in the 80s, but the thing did not function.
Yeah, and then of course they sold even more gloves when The Wizard came out, and they had that cool kid in that movie who said, "I love the Power Glove. It's so bad."
Yeah.
And that was at a time when bad meant good.
Yeah, you really hear that anymore. The Masterpiece Wizard, the one line from that film that I remember the most is, "California?"
And let's not forget Jenny Lewis, one of the greatest songwriters of our time, I'd say.
There you go.
Anyway, we're talking about Freddy. We're not talking about the Wizard.
But getting back to that scene, Rob, I wanted to just say that, yeah, the Nintendo scene is goofy and really out there. But great graphics, man.
Okay, so what's funny is some promo for this movie, they threw a funeral for Freddy.
Yeah, they had a lot of cast members from the franchise come to actually wish Freddy, to send off Freddy at an actual cemetery.
And then there was the whole, the news covered it, and they interviewed Rachel, and they asked, "Is there a chance that Freddy's going to come back?" And she was like, no, absolutely not. You will never see another Freddy film. 3 years later, we got something for our next episode.
Yeah, well, 3 years later is the 10th anniversary of the Nightmare on Elm Street series, and Bob's not about to let that go.
Oh, yeah, so we bring back Wes Craven Heather Langenkamp, John Saxon, and a pretty crazy story.
I think that 7 is one of the absolute best films in the series. Again, I kind of go by the rule that the films that Wes Craven is involved with are always the best ones. But decide for yourself. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, hey, before we wrap this up, though, Graham, I think we need to touch back on something we talked about in episode 1.
What's that?
Johnny Depp makes an appearance in this film.
That's right. Johnny Depp does have a small cameo in A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6, Freddy's Dead, where he basically, this is your brain on drugs, kind of. If anybody remembers that PSA about anti-drug PSA from the 1980s, I think it was kind of a play on that.
Yeah, they reshot one that he was doing, and then Freddy Krueger smashes Johnny Depp's face with a frying pan.
So technically, Johnny Depp was killed by Freddy twice.
Yeah, because Nancy doesn't die again.
Yeah, I think Johnny is the only character to be killed twice.
Save that for your trivia night, folks.
There you go.
So when Graham and I return, we're going to be talking about Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
Yeah, and I think it's a great film from 1994. If you have watched all the films up until now, that's great, because now you got a great ender for it.
I want to say, once again, thanks to Max Yoder. He donated money to our Patreon page. He is our employer. And if you'd like to be our employer, then you can donate too. We've got a few rewards. One of them is us saying thank you. And then, like I said, we're going to try not to delay, but I'm going to be making a couple of trips here soon. Graham and I will definitely need to be watching these films. We love talking about them. Send us an email, pumpkinspicepodcast@gmail.com. Please give us a rating and review. Tell us what you thought on iTunes. You can also find this on Google Play, Stitcher, Acast. Thanks for sticking with us so far. And Graham, thanks for doing another episode.
Yeah, no problem. I also wanted to mention to the listeners out there, let us know what horror films you're watching this season, and we'll judge you accordingly.
What would you say that Nightmare 6 or Freddy's Dead is a mix between? If you had to choose two things, what would you say this is a mix between?
I would say John Waters' Crybaby and David Lynch's Twin Peaks.